Well, chapter 24 was long enough that it took up almost all the time itself. So we're having to comment on it as a separate item on chapter 24 in Genesis. Here we see some interesting cultural things and some interesting other things that apply in the life of Abraham the patriarch and the people at his time. We're talking about the oldest servant he has here, and this would be the man who would be known as his steward. The steward was the man in charge. Normally, the patriarch would have virtually nothing to do with looking after the animals, nothing to do with looking after the finances, except he would be the guy. He wouldn't do the day-to-day stuff. He'd do the major things, make the decisions. But the day-to-day stuff, the assignments of the people to look after the sheep, the goats, the cattle, moving the pastures, all the rest of the stuff, this would be the steward's job. And here we see that Abraham tells this particular steward, I don't want you taking a wife for Isaac from the people around here. Now, interesting thing you think about for that. Obviously, it was within the possibility, as far as Abraham was concerned, that this steward could do exactly that. Find a wife for Isaac from amongst the people that are there. And he said he doesn't want to do that. Now he says, put his hand underneath his thigh. I think the more proper translation of that was, put your hand in my hand. And they would use that as a grasping or handshake or whatever you want, make a deal, a commitment one to another, that he was going to go to Abraham's people back in Haran and his family back there and find a wife for Isaac there. And the reason is critically important. And this was because Abraham was totally alone in his beliefs in God and his practice of worship and the standards of behavior that he accepted. And he knew that nobody else around, they all had their false gods, they all had their idols that they worshiped, they all did some really strange things. Really strange things. We're going to cover some of that later. And he didn't want Isaac to get involved with that. And he knew that if Isaac married a woman who worshipped idols and false gods and all these other strange things, that Isaac was not going to be worthy to carry on the covenant that the Lord had made. So Isaac had to find somebody who had been trained in the gospel, grown up in the gospel, that Abraham understood and accepted and exemplified. That's what he wanted. And so he sends his chief steward off. Chief steward takes 10 camels and some of Abraham's wealth and travels a couple of 100 miles at least north to Haran. And when he gets there, he's got a problem. How does he identify this girl that he's supposed to take as a bride for Isaac, who is hundreds of miles away and this woman has never seen? So he prays, he talks to Heavenly Father, and basically, oh God, I have no idea how much I'd have to look to find her. I don't know where to look. I pray, and he goes at the well, and you know, to understand, at least early in the morning and in the evening, the women come to get water at the well. And usually the wells are not what you think of as a place where you let down a bucket into a well. They're a place that you climb down into. And the more you're into the drier season, the further down you have to go. And so he says to Heavenly Father, well, do as let her give you some water, and then she'll say, I give your camels also. And you got any idea how much water 10 camels can drink? That's got to be at least 100 to 150 gallons of water. And most of these people would come with a clay jar that they would put on their shoulder, that would carry 3 to 4 gallons at a time. And that meant that this girl, if she's going to water the camels, was going to make a commitment that she's going to go down somewhere between 30 and 50 times down the stairs, up the stairs, to carry water for those camels. This was one industrious, loving, willing to work gal. And it says that there's another translation for how she looked. And it said, no man had known her. What it meant was, we believe, that no man had ever seen a woman as beautiful as her. She was a beauty beyond compare. And so this servant, when he sees all this stuff happening, he takes out an earring, which is a half shekel of gold, and he takes out 2 bracelets of 10 shekels of gold each. And he gives them to her. And he sends her, she gets sent back to her family, and he waits there to find out if the family's willing to accept him as a guest overnight so he can talk to them. There's a cultural identity thing happening here. There's a, how do I get to go to these people's houses? I send somebody that shows that I'm a serious guy, and they're going to send somebody back who's going to say, well, come to our house. But you need to understand what those shekels of gold meant. We talked about a shekel of silver, or at least 2 shekels of silver, being or 8 shekels of silver a year being a full wage for a really good shepherd. 1 shekel of gold is, because the shekel is a weight, not just not a money unit, it's a weight. And gold weighs more than silver, and is much more valuable than silver, at least 10 times more valuable than silver. And in some cases has been 15 times more valuable than silver. For each 1 shekel, and all these people would have known this, gold was rare, hard to come by. You could work your whole life and never possess even a flake of it. 1 shekel of gold was enough to buy a ton of grain, really good grain. So on her wrist, she goes to get water, and she comes home, and she is wearing 2 gold bracelets, which are enough to buy 40,000 pounds of grain at a time when the price of a pound of grain was enough to hire a laborer for a whole day. This woman, Rebecca, this girl, was wearing enough right there, just in those 2 bracelets, to feed her for over 100 years. Obviously, the guy who gave her that was big time serious, and he had money, and he was doing something he figured was right. So they go and get him, they bring him home, they feed him, they feed the camels, and they give them a place to stay, and in the morning he's up and he's ready to go, and he wants to take her back home, and they want her to stay for a while, and he says no. He says, the Lord prospered. This is exactly how this was supposed to happen. It's time I'm on my way. And so they ask her, and she says, I will go. And so just the same kind of faith, same level of faith as Abraham has. You get the information, and you're going to do it right away. So they say goodbye to her. May you become the mother of thousands of millions. Always a nice thing. And she's on her way, and then they get close to where Isaac lives, and they spot him coming out to meet the camels. And the steward explains who it is, and she covers her face with a veil, as modesty requires, as a betrothed woman. That signifies that she's accepted him. That's what that does. And then he takes her to his mother's tent. They're married, and he loves her. And that's putting it mildly.